What's up, everybody? This is episode 13 of Inside the Game right here on One Soccer and the One Soccer digital platforms. I am Gareth Wheeler, and we're just about here in terms of a long weekend, even though every day really seems the same. But instead of celebrating a long weekend, perhaps we can celebrate we're T minus one sleep away from some Bundesliga action. So we're looking forward to that coming our way on Friday. Tonight, my guest spent some time playing in Germany, but is much more beloved in this country for his contributions to our Canadian men's national team program. And of course, he is, without a doubt, a Montreal Impact legend. Before we get started, I want to send our condolences to the family of Gary Miller. Now, many people throughout the Canadian soccer community are very familiar with Gary. Unfortunately, he passed away earlier this week at the age of 63. Gary was the director of soccer operations with Ontario Soccer and has been really a key contributor across the province and the country for many years. He's been a great friend to me. We both played soccer at the University of Western Ontario. He was a coach of mine, and we've had plenty of associations and conversations with the state of football and how to take it forward in this country. I'm going to miss Gary dearly, as so many others will as well. So our thoughts are with his family and friends during this very difficult time. As always, as far as this program is concerned, let me know if you have a question for tonight's guest at Gareth Wheeler on Twitter. If there's a guest you want to see, that's where you can hit me up as well. We go every Tuesday and Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time right here on One Soccer. And you can watch anytime either on One Soccer or our YouTube channel. The Montreal Impact, they have a wonderful history. We had Mark DeSantos on a couple weeks ago. He was great as well. Of course, now the current head coach of the Vancouver Whitecaps. And we kind of look back at his Impact days and his Impact beginnings. There's been incredible players that have done the black, white, and blue of the Impact. Drogba, Nesta, DeVayo, and Piatti, just to name a few. But few top Impact players from the past have won over the hearts of a city, of a group of supporters like our guest tonight. Part because he's a hometown boy, done good, coming back home, representing the city that he was raised. Part because of the way that he led on the field, setting the standard as a leader and as a captain. And part because really he's as well liked as they come. And really there's something to say about that as well. He grew up in Brossard. His career took him across to Europe for 9 seasons, playing in Norway, Germany, and Denmark, capturing accolades along the way, all that before turning home to really kind of steer the ship on the Montreal Impact Major League Soccer Odyssey, playing and leading with distinction. After appearing in the most games in club history by an outfield player, he simply can't stay away as he remains part of the Impact's coaching setup under Thierry Henry and continues to be a proper conduit for young players making their way through the Canadian system as well. There are a few better to help develop and lead the way for our players of tomorrow. A 2-time Danish Cup champion, a 2-time Voyageurs Cup winner as well. He's the great number 8. It's a pleasure, and I'm thrilled to welcome Patrice Bernier inside the game. How are you, Patrice? Thank you for doing this.
Hi, thanks. Appreciate. Just want also, as I learned, send out my condolences to the Miller family. Of course, it's the whole soccer family, but directly to the Miller family because, yes, it's a passing. And it's always difficult in these situations.
There are so many people behind the scenes that do so much work for Canadian soccer, and it's really very much a tight-knit community, isn't it, Patrice?
Yeah, you realize as you stay longer the game, the people that you connect with that have been around for decades or more, that keep growing, that keep sharing and giving back to the game, which we need as we are a big country, and we need more and more people to connect to get the game keep growing, and as we get better for the national team at the end of the pyramid.
Well said. For me, you're the godfather of everything Montreal Impact. How is everyone doing? I understand that your family, everyone is safe and sound and healthy, so we're thankful for that. How's the greater Impact community doing right now, dealing with the stoppage and everything that comes with it?
Can't say it's not easy because we have connections, yes, through Zoom or phone, but not the everyday connections that we had 2 months ago. We were hoping that we were going to get the players to start doing a little bit of individual training, but Montreal right now, certain things are not permitted. So we're just hoping that we are able to get the yes, to get the players to start actually doing soccer movements, not trained to get as a whole, but just start doing soccer movements. And so we still get connected. We still meet once in a while, and especially the physical coach is still a fitness coach connected to the players to see how they're doing on an everyday basis to maintain their fitness. But yes, we're just waiting for the local area to allow us to start off and see where MLS will head in the next few weeks or months
Yeah.
to see when we restart.
Some other clubs are allowing their players train on an individual basis. I guess it's just a waiting game, right, Patrice? Like across the board, which makes it kind of difficult the way that this is all going to be rolled out.
Yeah, we do know that we're not the only club that has these predicaments where you maybe the regional area or the city does you don't have the allowance to train. But yes, once you see the other teams in the league, you're hoping that everybody can start out that, because it's also a sign that things are going forward, and that maybe phase 1 to phase 2 to phase of play at the end, and that like you said, Bundesliga is getting back, so everybody wants to get closer to being playing again. And I think the fans, the players, everybody just wants to get something that we resume to normal life.
No kidding. And it must be the dichotomy between a few months ago and what we've experienced. It must be crazy for you and the rest of the Impact. New coach and Thierry comes to town. You're straight into CONCACAF Champions League action. The fixtures are coming fast and furious. Then stop all of a sudden. And you guys were doing so well out of the gate as well. How difficult was that just to kind of pump the brakes and just grind everything to a halt?
Yeah, at the beginning it was really big exclamation point, because you don't know when we're gonna go pursue. We had started off, and like you said, as the coaching staff, we started realizing that certain things that were prepared in preseason were now being established and something that we could move on to the next phase. You could see our next things that Thierry Henry wanted to implement. But now it's standstill, and kind of got to restart all over once we do get to start. But it was interesting, like, because we were in Champions League and we
Yes.
were in the league, so we had some positive feedback, positive results that were telling us that we were working towards the right things. But unfortunately, like we know, everybody had to stop, and we're just looking forward to restart and hope that we can get back those little flames, those little ignite that the start that we had, and we can keep it on the longer stage, and hopefully in a season.
No kidding. It was impressive out of the gate. And you're obviously established. You and your family are from Montreal. Is Thierry still living in a hotel?
No, no,
Stuck in a
no.
hotel?
Thierry, just before everything happened, Thierry had found a place, but it was just
Okay.
a question of moving. And now, from last times that we've talked, he has his own place, so he's out of there, because Thierry's a guy who likes to who not stay in his room. So I don't know how about staying in a hotel for long, but he's now well established into his own domicile, and I think he's slowly having time to recognize his area and the neighborhood, and so it's good for him also in terms of mentally being able to be in your own things.
Good to know. We all love Montreal. I'd be ashamed just being stuck in your hotel room for this like a
Yeah.
period of time. I want to walk through your career from where you started to where you are today. And you grew up in Brossard, just right across the river from Montreal. You were a multi-sport athlete as well, playing both hockey and soccer. And some people tell me that you were an outstanding junior hockey player, that the only reason why you might have not have ended up going down that road to become a professional player in hockey rather than soccer was because of your height at 5'9", 5'10". That was small back in the day for a hockey player, especially for a defenseman. But in the modern day game, Patrice, where players are smaller, I mean, perhaps you could have made that next jump and been a hockey legend rather than a footballer.
Maybe because, yeah, the rules, the red line doesn't exist.
Yes.
Let's say the game's more open, more mobility for defenders. So yeah, I had the great opportunity to play two sports and to go to the QGMHL, which is the equivalent of OHL in Ontario, and but my choice, my heart was already going towards soccer. Even before I went to the junior ranks, I wanted to pursue soccer. It's just being Canadian in Canada, number one sport. You're one step or one draft away to be in NHL,
Right.
so I had to pursue it. but I got to meet a scout who told me that I was a good player, but yes, I was a defenseman. Taking on weight, going to the gym, you can do that, but growing at 18, that usually your growth spurts kind of stopped at that time. And like you said, usually they didn't look at you if you were not over 6 feet tall, unless you had amazing stats. So, but my story begins with the 1986 World Cup. My dream started with watching Canada at the World Cup, and also my parents are Haitian, so Brazil has always been we've been fond of. So I wanted to go soccer. Things kind of went the right way, but the path was set. Who knows? Had I been in this era, maybe I would have been able to make that step, and I would have had to make a choice. But my dream was to be like Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders, be able to play two sports. So who knows?
That's brilliant. Something sticks with me what you said. In hockey, there was always that next level or that next scout, the way that you could get noticed. It's not as clear of a path to make it as a professional footballer in this country, especially when you were growing up. So what was the grassroots football like in Quebec at that time? And what kind of obstacles did you need to surpass or overcome in order to become a professional footballer?
Yeah, we weren't in an era where yeah, the games were everywhere. You streaming, even agents, even academies didn't really exist back then. So your vision to become a professional was very far and
Yeah.
abstract. Because even though I dreamt of playing football, I was like, okay, in Canada the path seems to be very clear in terms of hockey, but soccer, the only thing I envisioned was if I get into the national team program, because then you hope you can go to a World Cup. World Cup, you hope that you could be seen by scouts that are usually there. So in Quebec, it was playing amateur soccer, club soccer, getting to the provincial teams, getting to the nationals, hopefully being seen by the national team coach, and then hoping to get into the camp and making the national team program, which I did. But it wasn't sure. It was just going back, and I was playing hockey at the time, so I had to, like, once winter came on, I went to hockey. But luckily, I made the Quebec provincial teams, did fairly well when I was 15, and was invited to under 17 national team camp. And then I joined the program, and I got to go to the World Cup and got to stay in the program. And that kept my, let's say, lifeline to being a professional, because I kept seeing, okay, I'm making the next step of the high level at my age group. But I didn't know how to be a professional. And that only happened towards getting closer to the Olympic team, getting to Syracuse, and meeting Ozek Oger, who was the national men's team coach at the time, who told me, you need to be in a professional environment if you want to make it to the men's team. And then I decided to make the step to the Montreal Impact in the A-League back then, because I had a team in my backyard, but it was still semi-pro, pro. We couldn't really consider it, but couldn't really pursue that. I was going to make it a career. I just had a dream to becoming a professional soccer player, and that was the path, because there was no academies, there wasn't no agents, no CPL like now. MLS was still American. There was no Canadian teams in the US league at the time, so it was difficult to see what was the path. But that's the way I went, going to the national team that kept everything alive, and I got the chance to become a pro later on.
You ended up at Syracuse. You mentioned for a couple of years. It's like basically the Canadian university team, isn't it? So many really good Canadian players have gone down and played at Syracuse. So many players right now, currently in Major League Soccer, have come out of Syracuse as well. And you come from an interesting perspective, because you went that route, but at the same time, currently and over recent years, you've been working with the Impact Academy. Can you compare and contrast the different pathways in order to make it? Is there one that kind of served your purpose or would have served your purpose better?
Of course, when you're young, you want to play your sport every day, all the time. So the new academies, Montreal Impact, TFC, Vancouver Whitecaps, even the private academies now allow you to train. And even, it's not lie, there's soccer specific areas now, which wasn't the case back then. Once winter came, it was in gymnasiums. You barely had sports soccer complex. So the academy route is something I think everybody would have wanted to be, because you would be able to train every day and
Yeah.
prepare and be on a 10-month program to see your evolution. But I don't discredit the university route, because a lot of other players have become professionals going that route. Me allowed me to play soccer on an everyday basis from August to November, December, and then of course there's the break, springtime in the university level. But it allowed me to compete against guys that were older than me, because I always had played against guys maybe a year or two older, but never really significant different age groups. So when you come into university, you're 18, 17, 18, you're playing as 20, 21, 22, maybe even the 23, 23, 4 years old against very good programs. Even though I was at Syracuse, we were playing UConn, Rutgers, UCLA, and all these other programs that were more known in terms of soccer powers. So difference now would be that because the professional academies, or just academies in general, you're able to train every day to see your evolution month after month, and coaches are now certified, licensed, better prepared to see your evolution and help you in that path. But I would say the university route still helped me, because in the States, or even some programs in Canada, you're well you're well versed, and you're structured, and you're in an organization that has gyms, facilities that allow you to be in a proper environment. But yes, now academies, you see competitiveness in different age groups. With, at the end of the day, when you're in a professional academy, there's a professional team, which is usually
Sure.
the goal to attain. But university, I still see guys like Tejan Buchanan, who's a player that was at Syracuse and now is at New England, and many others who have gone that route and are still professional. So there's no real right path. It's just the professional or the academy right path allows you to, if you could say, better be prepared to what the reality of a professional could be.
I'm so interested in just grassroots football in Quebec, because each province, they kind of stand on their own developmental platforms. Obviously, now across the country, that things are becoming much more streamlined, coast to coast to coast, which I think is a good thing. But what was the standard like in terms of football when you were growing up in the province of Quebec versus where it is today?
Back then, lot less players. Everything was really centralized to Montreal. If you were not in the Montreal area, there were not many teams outside the greater Montreal. Usually, the better players were in Montreal, and then there was the high performance center at the back then. That was where all the best players would train in Quebec, or probably in Ontario also. And then, but you were different age groups. There may be two of my age group, two another age group, and we were trained together. And then national team coaches would come and supervise and come and detect and recruit. Do you fit for my next national team program team? And so that was the reality back then. So if you were a very good player, elite, if you could say, one of the better ones of your age group, you would be confined with the 15 to 20 group of players, different age groups. So that's why I got to start off when I was 12, 13 years old, with players that were 2 or 3 years older than me, and train twice or three times a week with that type of group. So it was kind of like elite orientated. But now there's much more players. There's a lot more clubs, and so it's spread out. Can't say it's diluted, but there's a lot more talent out there, and now it's maybe even more difficult to pinpoint who is the best talent of every age group, because at every age it's different. Player can be very good at under 14, under 15, but his growth spurt has
Sure.
peaked. When another player, his growth spurt comes in later, and he's better at 16, 17. While back then it was usually the 15, 20 that were confined, and you knew these were the ones that were carried on to the next level. Sometimes one would come out later on, while now the structures, there's a lot of former players that are coaches, DTs, and there's a follow-up. And so now there's a connection to the Montreal Impact. So usually nobody falls out of the crack, but it's so diluted that it's difficult to see, okay, if a kid that's under 14, will he be the best by under 17, under 18? That's the
Right.
difficulties
And
now,
and
but
and
it's
and
it's a good
and
thing.
that's why like the Impact are doing their part. I mean, there's been some wonderful players are currently and have been developed within the Impact academies. We just had the birth of the Canadian Premier League, and I just wonder if there were more professional setups within the province, it would present even more opportunities, Patrice, and overall the standard might raise.
Yeah, the thing in terms of the academy, the good thing about the Montreal Impact Academy is there's 35 players that have become professional. 18
Wow.
have signed with the first team, but 35 have gone on to play USL, now CPL. I look at Halifax Wanderers. There's about 7 or 8 players that come from either the Impact directly or the academy, and so it's a sign that the academy is doing well in terms of providing players. But now the CPL is a new platform that says, okay, if I don't sign with the Impact right now, I can still pursue my dream to be professional. And also, we forget their development because
Yeah.
not everybody's Alfonso Davies, not everybody's Balu Tabla, where you join the first team and then you make it and then you go to Europe. Others take more time, need more games. We don't have a reserve, so the CPL is a great bridge right now between maybe an MLS team or going to Europe for
Did
players
you
that can't directly sign with the Impact. And like I said before, sometimes you see somebody who's 16, 17 and saying maybe doesn't cut it right now for the first team, but he goes and plays CPL, goes and plays professional and grows. And 2, 3 years later, with a lot more games, is more seasoned and seems to have developed maybe faster than a player that maybe is pro right now but doesn't play.
Sure. Hey, it would absolutely, it's absolutely important for that vantage point with the team now coming in Ottawa and Halifax. That's the missing link, right? It just doesn't feel like a complete Canadian league until you have a team in Quebec. I just wonder
Yes,
how you think a team would do. Would people rally around it?
definitely.
Is there a market for it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're talking about soccer in Canada. You have to be connected to almost every province, or at least coast to coast. It's great that it's in Halifax, but if you look at the major provinces that have the most players, which is usually Ontario, Quebec, BC, and you don't have a Quebec team in CPL, yes, I believe that it would be great to have another professional team in the province. Uh, Now, which is its best place? Is it Montreal, being right behind or right next to the Impact in the same market? Who knows? It's not that because I'm the Impact. It's just I believe right now could it survive? I don't know how it is for York with TFC, but I know Toronto in terms of the era. There's a much bigger market in terms of soccer. But there's Quebec City. There's I think there's 2 or 3 cities that are candidates that could have a team, and I do believe from speculations there's people interested. It's just now is the interest really going into concrete, putting their money there, talking about investment, and
Sure.
then starting the process to having the team so that maybe by 2021 there would be a team in Quebec. But I do believe the market of Quebec can survive with a second professional team. And like I said, there's so many players that needs to be another platform. There's a semi-pro league of PLSQ, but it would be great to have another professional team, and especially in Quebec, in the Canadian Premier League, so that you really have the major markets, if you could say
Here,
major markets, but maybe the bigger platforms in terms of players enrolled in provinces like Quebec, Ontario, and BC.
absolutely. I mean, y- how hard did you have to work to get your move to Norway? It came in 2002 because there wasn't an MLS side, there wasn't a CPL side. In order to pursue this as a professional venture, you had to make that move overseas. How difficult was it for you to get noticed, and how did the move come about?
Yeah, once I started playing with the Impact in the A League, I assumed that that's where I was going to play. Of course, I dreamed of going elsewhere, but like I said, the agents weren't something that was as common as now. There was no CPL. Going to MLS for a Canadian, you were a foreigner, still a foreigner in certain teams, but there wasn't a process where it was maybe easier to go. And it just ended up that the former coach of mine, Barry McLean, who
Mhm.
turned into an agent at the time, connected. We connected after my third season at the Impact. Told me he had something for me in Europe, in Norway, a trial, and I went there. It went well. Actually, I went to Sweden. Financially, the team couldn't handle the whole process, so I ended up going to another trial in Norway, and did well, signed there, and that's how my door opened to Europe. And I think Barry McLean influenced also other players that ended up being on the national team at the time, and still I think he's still involved as an agent. That's how it up, but it didn't really happen like, okay, this was the process. It was really I had done 3 seasons, and somebody had mentioned to Barry, you have to help Patrice. He needs to go to another level, and that's why it happened. It wasn't a club knocking at the door saying, "Hey, yes, we saw you play. We want your talent." It was via an agent who opened the door to a trial to a second division league in Norway, and then I took my chance and went there, and actually it didn't go so bad.
Yeah, it went really well for you. And oftentimes, Canadian players like yourself, I remember when you made that move over there, the biggest question is like, what was the standard? What was the experience like? Because you played for 2 different teams in Norway and did exceptionally well. You impressed based on apparently you had a record stamina test at that time that I read, and you made an impression for other clubs across Europe as well. What was that experience like going to Norway to really launch your professional career?
Yeah, it was a challenge because at the end of the day, you're going to Europe. Of course, everybody would like to go to Germany, England, Spain, Italy, France, the bigger markets. But it's not that easy, especially when you're Canadian with a Canadian passport, because in hockey, it may serve as it opens a wide, big door. But in soccer, there's Brazilians, there's Argentinians, there's players from Africa and everywhere. So you have to start somewhere. But it was a challenge because going to Norway, even though I knew the country from the Olympics, I did not know in terms of the culture, the language barrier, and the style of play. Because I had grown up in North America, even though I played with the national team youth, I played CONCACAF, went to one World Cup. So this was going to Europe and really going, okay, now I'm measuring myself versus players there that play every day, play every year, live and breathe in soccer, even though it's a northern country. And so when I got there, second division, it was a test. Went in, did well. Got transferred, sold a year and a half later. So obviously that meant I was doing something well, and went into a team that was in first place in Tippeliga Norway, top flight at the time, and just kept on doing my thing, and ended up showcasing myself very well, performing, and a team that was performing at the time. And did well. And yeah, the stamina test, I ended up, I don't know if anybody knows Morten Gums Pedersen. He
Oh
played
yeah.
at Blackburn, and he had the record at the time. I didn't really pay attention because I was like, okay, I knew I was somewhat fit, never knew my limits or what I passed. But that test actually showed me that, oh, I can actually manage a certain level threshold higher than most players. So gives you a confidence to know, okay, in a game I won't break down,
Right.
and so mentally also allows you to say, okay, I'm still going to be able to refresh. I know I can do more than the average player. But I performed there, did well, left a good name for myself, and there was actually a lot of other Canadians at the time. Olivier Ocean dominated the league over
Mhm.
there as a striker. Ali Gerba played there. Marco Reda, Chris Pozniak, Lars Hirschfeld, Kenny Stamatopoulos, Steven Adamo. So there was a influx of Canadians coming into Scandinavian leagues, and we were doing well, and got seen by a big time club in Europe, in Turkey, Besiktas, which who knows how my career would have gone had I been sold to that club. But
Yeah, so I read that they made a bid for you. Was it €1 million at that time? I mean,
yes,
how did that play
1.2
out?
million euros.
I mean, that's a big club coming in for you. How much did you fight to try to make that move a reality, and how disappointing was it when it didn't play out?
Actually, it came the story of how it came. I played a game. Uh, People were coming to see a highly touted young talent from the other team. I played really well. After the game, Besiktas
Hmm.
people came to see me, saw they had interest, but it didn't resume to anything. It was just after the game. A week later, nothing, and I ended up going to Gold Cup 2005. So I was heading to Seattle, and by the time I landed, my phone was on fire because a bid had been put and my club had refused. But I was told that next bid would come in and that I would use probably most likely be gone by the time I come back by Gold Cup. But that didn't happen. Uh, Besiktas said, "Look, if we're going to put more money, the coach and the director have to come and see me play." They came. watched me play, said I was on point. But big clubs, they're not looking at one player; they're looking at other players. And I learned a few days later, by the time I came back to Norway, that they had bought Kleberson from Manchester United for 2.5 million euros. So I was in a good
Oh,
group of players, but I would have preferred to be able to go. And I didn't really have the chance because by the time I came back a week, two later, the deal was done. So it wasn't like I could go, look, you want to put pressure on the club saying, look, this is an opportunity for me to go to a next level. Back then, Besiktas was playing Champions League, Europa League quite consistently. Atiba is now there, so he knows. But I never really able to push, and the Besiktas didn't come in because we were playing UEFA, and I was playing UEFA Cup, and then I got cup tied, but the deal never went to the next level. They just spent more money on somebody playing in a bigger club, bigger league.
well, they picked the wrong guy, Patrice. Let's be honest here.
It
Cleberson,
would have
big
been great.
name, big
Cleberson didn't
club.
do so well, so I
No,
presume that they should have made a better choice. But that's the
but
reality of football. You learn a lot of things by moving from Canada to abroad about the transfer market, because that's one thing I didn't really grew up with when you're a North American kid.
you left Turkey for your national team teammate in Atiba Hutchinson, right?
Yeah, I said, don't worry. In a few years, somebody else very good will be coming around. So
Another
another
Canadian.
will make waves in Besiktas.
At the same time, you were emerging as a stalwart in our Canadian men's national team. You made your debut against Czech Republic as well, playing against a player like Pavel Nedved at that time, one of the world's best. I mean, what was it like to launch your national team career? I'm guessing there was a lot of pride that went into it.
Yeah, I had been called up before we played in Estonia, but I didn't play, so kind of disappointed because you want to have that first cap. But I won't lie, it ended up being my first cap versus Czech Republic. They were third in the world at the time. Pavel Nedved next few weeks is the declared Ballon d'Or.
Wow.
They had Jan Koller, Tomas Rosicky, Poborski was in Benfica coming out of Man United. Peter Cech was still not yet known. So it was a quality team. We got crushed, but it's definitely something that I will always remember. My first cap playing against, and I was playing on the right side, which Pavel Nedved was playing on the left side. So me and Paul Stelteri had to manage him. But when you say your first cap, international soccer, you're playing against one of the bigger powerhouses at the time in soccer and the best player in the world, or deemed the best player in the world at the time. It's a story that I will never forget. So it was a great first cap, and ended up being able to stay in the national team for quite some years after that. But I won't forget Czech Republic versus Pavel Nedved, that's for sure.
Well, I look back at that era of Canadian men's national team football. I mean, Gold Cup 2007, you guys get robbed against the United States. The Atiba scores. It still should have stood today. Then in 2009, in the build-up and in the Gold Cup, you score your 2 goals that you scored for the Canadian men's national team. Is there a part of you that look around and think of the Atibas, the Stalteris, yourself, some of the talent that you had in that team, and say, oh, maybe if we played some more games, maybe if there was a little bit more opportunity, we could have done something at that time?
Yeah, definitely. Before this golden generation, I would say we were the other golden generation, but the Gold Cup opened eyes to everybody that what we could do. Thanks to Stephen Hart, because he was the one who actually told us at the time, guys, I don't think you know how good you are. And we're talking about Julian de Guzman playing in Deportivo La Coruña and playing La Liga versus Iniesta and Ronaldinho. And I think he won Player of the Year, was one of the better players in the Gold Cup. Atiba was very young, up and coming. Ian Hume, Dwayne De Rosario, Paul Stalteri, Thomas Rosicky. So there is a regret that we did not do better after that Gold Cup. It just seems like at the World Cup qualifiers we weren't able to gel. I would say I always call it a complex of inferiority. We always told ourselves, you go at the national team and then you say, oh, we're playing Costa Rica, we're CONCACAF. So the mindset wasn't as strong. I think John Herman's doing quite a good job in terms of setting the tone and saying, look, we are Canada. There's no difference. Yeah. US, Mexico, they're good, but we have to show that we're Canada. So, yeah, it was great to play with those guys, but I think we should have done better because the talent pool that we had at the time, we should have at least gone to one World Cup. And like I said, we had done well in 2 Gold Cups that show that we could do it in our area. but we couldn't do it at the World Cup qualifier stage. That's unfortunate, but I do not regret having played with those guys and gel with those guys, and realize that a lot of those guys were premier players in their clubs. Starting, they were stars of their clubs. So yeah, it's a regret that we didn't do more than just a semifinal, that we got robbed, but still
Robbed.
we could have been the benchmark for sending Canadian soccer somewhere, and hopefully this new generation will be the one that passes the ladder, the stage that we couldn't.
Absolutely. The goal should have stood. Atiba absolutely robbed that group.
We needed VAR.
Absolutely. This is one of the cases where no one would have complained, at least in this country, about VAR. We have a lot to get into with the Montreal Impact, but before you ended up back in Montreal in 2012, a couple more stops. I mean, for the countries that you played in across Europe, some of the most beautiful ones, Patrice, Norway, Germany, you played with Kaiserslautern there. And then you spent time in Denmark. I believe you just had your 10th year anniversary of the Nordsjælland team that went on and won the silverware for the first time in Cup history. That must have been a special time in your career, playing in Europa competition, playing in some really footballing mad countries.
Yeah, in Norway, I got a chance to touch Europa League a little bit, but we didn't really win. We didn't go anywhere. And when I went to FC Nordsjælland in Denmark, I was 28 at the time, and I was jumping into a club that was young, had a lot of young talent, but needed experience, players to lead the younger group, and wanted to play attractive football. The coaches were big fans of Barcelona, so it suited my game. And I was jumping into a project where you're like, okay, let's see where this could go. And 2 years later, we win the Danish Cup. We go to Europa League. And then we win the Danish Cup second year, the next year. And actually, by the time I left to come back to Montreal, the club won the league. So having been part of that resurgence, that new project, and now Nordsjælland is known as one of the clubs in Denmark that actually generates a lot of revenue from selling a lot of young talents, and benchmark for a certain way of playing. So it was great to be part. For me, it's my fondest moments as a player, because you playing in a team where everything is in sync, and play with a former teammate of mine, Michael Parkers, that we met again in MLS. So it was great because you could play with players, and you didn't even think to talk. You just knew where players were, and you usually remember these moments once you leave, because once you live it, you're in it. But once you leave, you realize, man, I really had pleasure playing this way, because I never saw this way of playing again, or I never got to play this way, even though I was in Montreal and happy, yes, in my hometown, but we never got that feeling again of playing proper possession football, and the way I perceive football should be played.
That's really interesting that you say that, because obviously you became a Montreal Impact legend, making that move home in 2012. How difficult was that decision? You were 32, you're playing for a good club side, you were happy with your football. Was just the pull of coming home, being a part of this Major League Soccer project with family and friends nearby? Was that just too difficult of a chance to turn down at that time?
I knew that the club was going to join the MLS, but I didn't know if they had any interest in me. But once the interest came, I had a clause in my contract that allowed me to leave. And once it was serious and we inked out a contract and found a common ground, coming back was leaving Europe, which was tough, because your dream is always to go there and excel and go be part of the bigger stage. But I felt the same thing as when I was in Nordsjælland. The project of Montreal Impact was bigger than me. It was coming back home, establishing Quebec soccer, Canadian soccer, and being at the age that I was, 32, I felt, okay, I'm confident in what I can do, what I can bring. And also, most people had not really seen me play that often every Saturday, and grow in the club at the club level. So it was an opportunity to show, look, this is how I refine myself being in Europe, and how I can help my hometown club, and establish myself as a player and with my club, and hope and making the playoffs, and establishing the Impact in the league and having success. So yeah, the cry of coming back home was what made me come back, because it was difficult, because you're leaving Europe. it's what you dream to go, but it was coming back to know that the heart was going to speak more than the ambition of making it to play for FC Barcelona.
I love the way that you played football, Patrice. I mean, you're so difficult to get the ball off of. You're strong as an ox. Beautiful 1-2 touch football at times, but in your first season, you actually scored the most goals for the Impact that year. And it's difficult for expansion teams because it's a collection of new players with new coaches, everyone coming together in a league where other sides are that much more well established. How difficult was that to kind of showcase your talents and your ability within a team construct that was kind of being created as you went along?
It wasn't easy because at first nobody knows each other. This was a
No.
nucleus of players that Americans, Italians. I was the only Canadian at the beginning, Europeans, and it's a melting pot. But what type of team are we going to be? We don't know. And actually, after 4 games, the coach at the time, Jesse Marsh, decided that okay, I'm going to put a younger player in, put in Colin Warner. So I put spent some time on the bench, and then when I got my new chance, just decided to look. I want to play my game. I'm just going to play my game. I was trying to please everybody and be the leader, and but you're not playing. You're not comfortable in what you want to do. And then I started playing my game, and suddenly things went well for me. And suddenly also the team started gelling and finding an identity of how we wanted to play. And I was connecting with Felipe, a young player up front, and we had good chemistry. And we went on a good run from June to July. And yes, scoring goals, a lot of them in penalties, but penalties you have to score them. But especially I was known for assists, which was great to have a statistically my best year. I wouldn't say my best year as a professional. That was probably Northland, but it was great to be able to showcase yourself and say, look, I can play in this league, and I can not only be a good player for the Montreal Impact, but I could be a good player in terms of my position in the standards of this league, which I did in 2012, and it allowed me to go to an All-Star game in 2013 and to be recognized by some of my peers, which were Divayo, Nesta, and even Thierry Henry, which I was playing against.
Yeah, it wasn't a popular decision for Jesse to decide to not play you at that time. I mean, look, are you still in contact with Jesse, and are you surprised where he's taken his coaching in over the course of his career? Now he's in Germany. He's doing or in Austria. Sorry,
Yeah.
he's doing a wonderful job with Salzburg. Do you still keep in touch with Jesse?
No, to be honest, I haven't had the chance to chat with him since he left. When we finished, we were always in good terms in terms of communication. I didn't like when he putting me on the bench, but we were always communicating. He always was very open to his decisions, and I liked his mind because
Mm,
he sold me he was the one who sold me on the idea of coming back on the way he wanted to play. He spent 1 year. Unfortunately, he didn't stay longer than that. But you could see he was somebody that was meticulous, had ideas, and I think it was his first time as a head coach. So it was just trying it out and figuring out what works, what doesn't. And you saw it after with the New York Red Bulls. It ended up doing well and allowed him to
yeah.
make a bigger step to go to Germany and then now Austria, coaching Red Bull Salzburg and playing Champions League, which I wouldn't say I'm surprised because he's really somebody he's a hard worker, has a clear ideas of what he wants in terms of football. But no, we haven't kept in contact because football world things spiral, and I was still playing, so you're really concentrating on your own bubble. But definitely, it would be nice to chat with him again as a coach now to see the other side of things and to pick his brain.
In those early days, you got to play with two Italian footballing legends in Alessandro Nesta and Marco Di Vaio. What was that experience like, and how did they kind of, or what? How did you make their transition to life in Montreal that much easier?
It was fantastic because when Marco came, it's funny with his father. I kept laughing because I said I spent my youth watching Serie A on Tele Italia, and I was watching them grow in through Serie A, and now they're on the other side of the Atlantic and playing in my hometown, and we're playing together. So at first, you just want to match to say, hey, I can play with you guys. I know you played at the
Yeah.
highest level, but I can play. You won't look bad playing with me, and gain their respect. And especially, I think just to see that on the human side, these guys were, even though they're stars, they were just regular football guys who living their dreams. and that you were able to now chat with him about AC Milan, the national team, and Europe. So it was great to share with them and have that experience. And especially, I think I had good chemistry with Marco Di Vaio in terms on the field, finding him to give him the ball to score, because that guy he just knows how to score goals, and it's incredible to see that the level that these guys had attained and be able to play with them.
I mean, you've been here every step of the way. The Impact have managed to bring in some of the best in terms of names in football, from Nesta to Didier Drogba. Piatti did an incredible job during his time in Montreal. Boyan and Wanyama has now just joined the Montreal Impact. What is it about the city that makes these players want to come play there or represent the Montreal Impact?
Well, at first, guys like Piatti, you have to give the credit because there was Nick DeSantis, and the club was able to sell them the project and the idea of what it is to come play for a club like Montreal, in the environment what Montreal is, a European type of blend of city, Latin base, if you can say. And then after that, but the other players, definitely, you have Thierry Henry, who's your coach. Now I hang around with Thierry, so I see his phone, see the people that contact him and that have interest of just come and play for Thierry Henry. So it's impressive to see how he tracks. But I think also it's just Montreal, the Impact. People tend to see the club and see the infrastructure, the training facility, the stadium, and they feel that, this is actually, and I think the project of the MLS also is stadiums are full, and you can, maybe in Europe you're harassed, you play, but you stay at home. While here you can still go into the street and go to restaurants and work and eat, enjoy, and not be too under the pressure of just performing. But I think Montreal is just the Impact. The club does a good job to sell the product. And now that Thierry Henry is the coach, I think that's another even bigger selling point, where players want to play for a guy who's reached the high pinnacle of football. And also, they all know he's a big mind of soccer. So they're curious to see how this guy can bring me to another level. And hopefully he can bring the club also to more successful years with him at the helm.
It seems like, you know, as much as Henri is now an advocate for the Impact, it seemed like Didier Drogba was at that time as well. It seemed like initially he came in, but really he grew to embrace the city and the club. And he's just such a massive figure in the game of football. What was it like playing with Didier Drogba and having him around on a regular basis, and just the ability to put his arm around a young player and kind of help show them the way and bring them along?
Didier, it was fantastic. You know, we got Di Vaio, we got Nesta, but then you have Didier Drogba, which at the time, in terms of worldwide, not just the player, but the charisma, the personality, the ambassador that he was for the continent of Africa and known worldwide. So when he arrived, I think he just shocked everybody. You saw how people greeted him
It's
at the
awesome.
airport. But then after that, like I said, like Nesta and Divao was just a human being. He was really a big leader, helped me a lot in terms of as a captain to keep the team united, because even though we had done well in Champions League, we were not doing so well in MLS. And then he started off as a bang, and he came in. You know, when you ask those guys why Montreal, and it's mostly because he had friends that came to school here. We speak French; it's his first language, so the connection was easy. And then after that, we had great time, especially 2015. He banged 11 goals in 11 games, and then you're like, and then you know, they confirmed the hype. People think, oh, they're coming in for the last paycheck, they're retiring, but no, they play at this level and they're able to maintain that level and push the rest of the team forward. So it was great to share with him. I'm happy to see a friend. I can chat with him once in a while. These are things that a decade ago, 20 years ago, when I was a young player, I would have never thought about that. But now I play with Drogba. I'm coaching with Thierry Henry. The world of football is
Pretty
fantastic.
cool. Pretty cool. And you were their captain. Is there more pressure as a captain dealing with a group where you have players playing and coming from things on all levels, like in terms of their background, in terms of their quality as well?
Yeah, because look, I'm Patrice Bernier, yes, well known in Montreal or in Canada a little bit, but this is DJ Drogba. They played in
Yeah.
Chelsea, played at World Cup, so their pedigree is much higher than yours. But like I said, the human being first and foremost, when you make the connections, and you see the charisma and the personality that he has, it makes it easy. Because as a captain, yes, for one, I'm captain. Two, also the image of the club to sell what it is to play for the Montreal Impact. But then I had him, and he helped a lot because, like I said, we weren't doing as well, and he was one of the biggest advocates to say, "Look, guys, we're together, and we're working together." And it never made it like I'm bigger than the players or the club. I'm just part of the group, and I'm one of you guys, and we have to be together. And that's when you're a captain, it makes it much easier. Of course, there's certain other things that I have to dealt with because when it doesn't go well for a big name like that, people want answers, and
Right.
usually you become the figure of the club, the figure of the
Yeah.
players. But I considered him a friend, and I had lived things like him as a player, but it was just great to share these moments with him. And like I said, I had the great distinction to say that I played with Didier Drogba and had an assist in one of the biggest games for me against Toronto FC.
Yeah.
So I got to score and give a goal to a great time striker, and also like Divao. So
Well,
fantastic.
at that time, I mean, although you were an expansion team, things started to tick along relatively nicely. You win a back-to-back Canadian championships. You go on a wonderful CONCACAF Champions League run all the way to the final where you fell to Club America. And then in 2015, you mentioned it. This was a time where your group really came together. Drogba was banging in goals. You embarrassed, quite frankly, Toronto FC in the first round playoff game in Stade Saputo. I loved your midfield as well, the BDB. Bernier, Donadell, Bernadello, you guys were just rock solid, and teams had such a difficult time playing and beating you. And this is really when the TFC rivalry heated up, wasn't it? It's because they started to improve, but you guys were really kind of setting setting the tone at that point and kind of raising the bar in terms of where you guys were in terms of that rivalry.
Yeah, the rivalry has always existed because, of course, when you're Montreal, you don't really like Toronto, or Toronto, you don't really like Montreal and the fans. But the 2015, I would say that's where, to 2016, the climax of what the rivalry became. And for me, the best rivalry in MLS, because Toronto had invested a lot to become something new and something successful. And we also, on our own end, had done the Champions League and had Drogba and Piatti, and we wanted to show that we want to be in the playoffs too. And that first game against them in the playoffs, we had just played the home game, the final game of the season. We beat them the first playoff game that in the history of Toronto, first home playoff game for us, and to have that the victory was great. I believe that we kind of ignited Toronto to go where they went the next level, because we hope to get there also.
Yes.
And 2016, it was a climax in terms of showing people what Canadian soccer was about. Two Canadian soccer clubs fighting it out to get to MLS Cup, and probably for me one of the best moments in terms of Canadian soccer, where hundred thousands of people came to sit down to watch the game, and hundreds of thousands of people watched it on TV, where it was really two teams going at it that quite even. It played itself out to certain things, but it was a match to who believed the most, and unfortunately we lost in 2016. But it's
We got to
highest
discuss
moment.
that. We got to discuss that quickly because it's almost surreal looking back at those two legs of the Eastern Conference Final between two Canadian MLS club teams. Not only in terms of the drama, but the twists and turns, the subplots within. It was just wild, and it all started off in the Big O with the lines painted on the field incorrectly. I mean, what were your thoughts inside the room? Like, it's a little bit surreal that something like that would happen because that's not something that I've ever seen before. And then the game 3-0, 3-2. What was going on through your head? What do you remember about that night?
Yeah, the Lions. I haven't lived that since and before, so I know certain people think that we maybe have manipulate things just to waste time, but why we should be wasting time? Because we want to go on the field, we want to play. So unfortunately, that was something that happened at the time. It made it a story. Sometimes you need these. I can't say you need, but they happen and they make it even better in terms of the storyline. We started off in a bang. We started very confidently in first half 2-0, 3-0 after 60 minutes. The game was pretty much in the bag, but that's where maybe mentally we dozed off. got maybe too confident, and Toronto didn't stop and got the 2 away goals that allowed them to believe even more into this in the second leg. Yes, it's always going to be a regret that maybe we could have managed that first leg better, but yes, in terms of the storyline, you can't. If you are a fan and you're looking at it like, man, the lines, what's happening there? It's there's something. This has never happened, or at least not in North America. Things happening like that, and then the Impact started in a bang. Toronto come finish off the game, even though you won. You feel like we let them have something for the next leg, and then the second leg turned out to what it was, and TFC managed to go through. But I know it hurts.
When you're up 3-0 in that game, I mean, there has to be a part of your mind just naturally at that time thinking, we have this. You know, I know we're still in the first leg. We're at home. There's like 62,000 people there. You're dominating proceedings. It must have crossed your mind that we're doing this, and this is
Yeah,
really ours to be
definitely. Like
had.
I said, you start off the game. You got the crowd. You got the score. You got everything that tells you the other team is in the ropes. For 60 minutes we had, but like I said, we dozed off. Credit to them, they kept playing. They waited for an opportunity because the aggregate goals still counts for double if you get the
Yep.
tie, and we should have kept going and scoring a fourth, but that's the storyline. But yes, I on the field, you're like, man, okay, we got this, because this is what you want. You want to be leading 3-0. You want to be heading, showing the other team. There were signs that the other team seemed they weren't getting along on the field. So everything was, the telltale signs were all there to say this game is ours. We still won, but we didn't close the door. We let a little bit of light, and they took it and they carried with it in the second leg.
I mean, your ball through to Oduro on that first goal was simply spectacular, Patrice. But that's a difficult surface to play on inside the Big O. But it seems like no matter what Impact team it is, they rise to the occasion with the atmosphere that's created in there. I know other teams hate coming in there, but you as a player, do you like playing on that carpet? Do you like playing on that field?
I'm gonna tell you the body, because at the time I'm 36, 37, so playing on that type of turf is not made for a player of my age at the time. But the Big O, the fact is, when it's 60,000, yes, there's that atmosphere that, okay, the people are behind you. There's a buzz, and you're playing on turf where most teams play, and even us, we play at Stade Saputo on grass most of the year. So it's kind of like we got to take advantage of this, which we did, because the game goes a bit faster. But at the end of the day, like I said, we didn't close the door. We let a little bit of a light for them to believe, and we now ended up going in the second leg with them believing that they could get the result, knowing that in Toronto it was difficult for the Montreal Impact.
Well, that second leg is perhaps the greatest game I've seen live, and I know that you came out on the wrong side of it, but with the atmosphere under the lights, the snow, rain coming down in the sky, the back and forth nature of it all, do you look back on that night fondly, or is it just the way that the result went? Does that make it that much more difficult to go back and watch it or accept what happened?
Yeah, it's difficult. I don't watch games a second time. It's difficult because at the time you saw yourself just like they did going to the final, and as a captain of your own club and from my hometown, because Montreal, you're like, man, this could be a shot where you want to leave your legacy, which is from home, finishing your career, knowing that you brought your club to the heights of getting to the MLS Cup and winning it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult, but at the same time, you tell yourself you lived it, you created great moments. That the loser always says, yeah, we could have done that, we couldn't have that, but I still lived it. It was a great soccer moment for Canadian soccer. As a Canadian person, I tell myself, the kids, the backlash, if we could say, of what I've heard was, this was great Canadian moment in soccer, and that you could say for certain kids, they were like, I want to play a game like that again. I want to be in a derby between Montreal and Toronto. So that's what I'll be proud of. But at the end of the day, I want to go to the MLS Cup final. So yes, of
Yeah,
course,
no
it's
kidding.
sour that I wasn't able to get there.
We just have about 5 minutes left. It's funny. I look over the course of your career, you were sent off twice, both times against Toronto FC. I mean, the second one in the 2017 Canadian Championship in the 89th minute, I still don't know how you were sent off, Patrice. I mean, you came through a Marquis Delgado. You shouldn't have been sent off there, but you were so graceful in leaving the field.
I understood one thing: the referee takes the decision. I've never seen a referee go,
Change
"Oh,
his
you know
mind.
what? It's not a red card. Let me go back." We didn't have VAR back then, so it wasn't like you could stop and say, "Wait, let me just check that back again." Uh, I played with my whole heart, and as the worst is, it's the same referee who told me twice, and same referee, same card. And a few minutes before, I remember he told me that, Patrice, great respect, always respect for you. You're a gentleman on the field, and I get a red card directly. So it's funny, but those games against TFC, there's only one way. There's no two-way street. Is you play your way and you play with your convictions. You play all out. And like as you said, I got my red cards against Toronto FC. So it says to the point of what it meant to me to actually play against Toronto and win.
What is the rivalry like from an Impact perspective?
The rivalry is still living. Of course, you don't have people like me, but you still have Josie, still have Michael, Samuel Piet is now there, Jonathan Osorio. So it has to carry itself. But the pinnacle of that playoff was because there was so many people involved and carrying it. Jovinko, the stars on the other side, Drogba on our side, Piatti, and then you have the local ingredients of Bernier, Osorio, and all of that. So, but it still carries on because it's the fans. It's a rivalry that's always going to be there. And now we were reaching moments at the same time, reaching the playoffs, reaching the cup finals. And so those are the ones that ignite even more the rivalry. So those are the ones that you need to make it to keep it that way.
You retired with 56 caps. I thought it was very cool coming back under Octavio at the age of 37 to play your final games with the Canadian men's national team. You retired all-time appearance record for an outfield player with the Impact, 4 years as captain. You're regarded generally as the best player to come out of the province of Quebec. You got to look back on that with a whole lot of pride, Patrice.
Yeah, when I look that last day when I finished, I look that moment when I finished was like I lived it. I realized, my dream was to be a professional player, and I lived it. And I'm finishing it off at home, being captain of my hometown team. Things that when you were a kid, what you want to do, you want to play soccer. You want to play soccer in your own area, if you can. If FC Barcelona was here, or we could play FC Barcelona away, it would be the same. And so looking back, you always want to break barriers. You want to be somebody that you say, how did I push myself to the maximum? Did I live something that I can say I'm proud of and that people recognize themselves or see, okay, he was good, but he gave everything he had. So when you look back and I hear the accolades, yes, I'm proud of myself because I realize I'm from a hockey country. I could have probably gone to the hockey route, but I went with my passion and I lived it to the fullest, and I kind of left that on the table. So all those accolades, yeah, it says that I did something good, and I'm happy that, and I'm hoping somebody will do better.
Let's end on this. Today, obviously, you're an assistant coach with the Montreal Impact. We've talked about it. Henri, the new head coach. Wanyama comes to the club, a player that a lot of Canadian fans know for the Canadian Premier League. Joel Waterman steps up into the team. It feels like there's a really good mix going on of Canadian content and quality players from abroad. Boyan as well. What do you make of working under Thierry Henry thus far, and where things are trending and going for the Impact right now?
It was a good start. I believe it all starts. You need to send positive vibes. We had a new technical director, president that comes in, Thierry's name. All these things kind of go, oh, these are positive signs. Then, Boyan jumped in by the end of last year. Wanyama comes in. Like you said, a lot of contingency of young Canadian players coming in. And we started off quite well. So those were good signs that to show that, okay, I'm not going to say we're going to be winning the MLS Cup and making playoffs every year, but you need those signs to convince the players that this is the path, and believe in what the coach wants to put forth, what the club wants to go forward with, and so right now the ingredients are there. It's just working with Thierry and the staff to make sure that we move on, and that we're able to take the necessary steps, one game at a time, just like we did before there was this break, and attain success, but also identity and a clear way of playing where the players see themselves, the fans see themselves, and the club is proud of.
Excellent. Do you mind if we just end here on our top 5 segment? It's rapid fire. I ask you your best or top blank, and then you give us an answer, maybe a short explanation. Then we'll wrap this up. So our top 5 or best 5 segment. Who's the best player that you ever played with on your team?
Best player that I played with on my team, I gotta go with Nacho Piatti.
Nacho Piatti.
I got the chance to play. He was at the pinnacle of his career, 28 to 34. The things he put, and he put himself as one of the top 3 players. With at one point, it was him, Jovinko, and David Villa, the best players in this league. And you could debate in terms of style, but what I could see him do in training every day was like Drogba and all of them were great, but I would have wished to see them when they were at 28, 29, 30, sure, when they're really at their peak, because they were still higher level. But I got to see Nacho grow and prove himself as one of the best players in this league. And it was impressive to just play with him and see what he could do day in, day out, and in games too.
The best player you ever played against?
That's Deco. Got the chance to play in Portugal. He was playing at Barcelona at the time, and he was himself 30, and he was the driving force with Ronaldinho of that Barcelona era.
He's very underrated in terms of overalls,
yes.
And I completely agree. The best coach you ever had?
Best coach, that's a tough question, because there's a lot of coaches. I always think I see him take a lot. I would name one Norwegian coach, Per Mathias Homo. I think he just brought a lot of things. And Bob Lilly, he was an American coach who worked a lot of tactics and prepared me. Having played with him, under him, prepared me for when I got to Europe. Had I not had him, I would have had to learn a lot of things. Got there, but he was very diligent on certain things, and allowed me to see the game in a broader perspective. So Bob Lilly and Per Mathias Homo in Norway.
The best game you ever played in?
The best game? Oof. My best game is probably somewhere in Nordsjælland, but the game I will always remember is Montreal, Toronto FC 3-0. Goal, assist to Drogba, home. And especially I spent a year on the bench, so there's a lot of other emotional factors that come into the place.
You guys were phenomenal. I called that game on the radio that night. You guys were absolutely phenomenal on that night in 2015. And your best or your favorite footballing moment that you've had?
Best footballing moment? Yeah, I would say winning the cup, the 2 cups, and going to the Champions League final. Even though we did not win it, we got there where nobody expected us to be. So Champions League final, getting there, that was, even though we lost, it's still bitter, but we got there and nobody expected us to be there. So it's a great moment. Great.
That was our best 5 segment. Listen, you're an absolute club legend. You're a Canadian soccer success story, and we hope that there's more Patrice Berniers who are coming through the ranks. You had an incredible career on the field. We can't wait to see what your next career looks like off the field. So far, so good, working with the likes of Biello and Henri now. Sky's the limit, Patrice. We thank you for doing this. We wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll see you and the Impact on the field in the not so distant future.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And I hope we can restart and just the surroundings, just soccer itself, because it like I said, brings a lot of joy and entertainment to people, and we can all live our passion again.
Awesome. He is Patrice Bernier, Montreal Impact legend, and I'll say it, future mayor of the city of Montreal. If he can handle that, but I'm sure you could handle it, Patrice. Patrice Bernier joining us here on Inside the Game. A reminder, subscribe, like us on Twitter, continue to spread the word about this show, the Hangouts on One Soccer, and Happy Hour with the focus on the women's game as well, each and every Wednesday evening. Coming up next Tuesday when we're back, the great Kobe Jones will join us on the program. Of course, he'll go through his Major League Soccer career. So we'll be back then. Keep it healthy, keep it safe over the course of the long weekend. On behalf of everyone here at One Soccer, I am Gareth Wheeler, and we'll see you next week.